The next
oh, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, whichever. The next complaint is LSU 18111. And this is there was a lot to this complaint, but a lot of it was about the engineer involved. The basis for the complaint against the surveyor was that the boundary lines shown were not correct. And that was substantiated by another surveyor of the subject property. The surveyor that was complained against agreed with the second survey and said that he had done the research back to, I think it was an 1890 plan, but had missed a plan that was recorded earlier than that showed the subject property. Again, in this, it was a large presentation to the municipality, and the surveyor said, I didn't even know this was being submitted. It was years after I did the work. The plan wasn't signed by the surveyor. There was no indication that it was a draft plan, but it was also an electronic copy, so you don't know what may have changed in the presentation to the municipality. As far as a recommendation, we could say that the surveyor didn't do sufficient research. However, the surveyor also admitted to it, and I'm a little bit reluctant for somebody that says, yeah, I made a mistake, to find against him in this case. This is open to discussion. I don't know how you all feel about this.
I did not, first of all, see that the licensee's contract was part of the submission when he had the complaint sent to him. Did I miss that? Or I guess my concern right off is in this information that was presented to us, there's really no acknowledgement other than once that no one did speak with the surveyor. So I agree with you that for 4 years through this process, why wasn't the plan completed, I guess, first of all? I mean, if there's a contract to say it was going to be completed, it just seems like we're missing correspondence of what happened from that unsigned plan that was delivered to when the complaint happened. Was he totally removed? We do know that engineers do take our survey plans and run with it, which is the bigger problem here with the municipality getting this through without, there's a whole other component here outside of the survey part, but it just seems like the correspondence in the middle is all missing. So I do tend to agree with you, Michaeline, that it's hard to say something was wrong, but at the same time, why wasn't that survey plan completed? And I guess I'm hanging out there a little bit, and I was wondering if Shep or Jay had any comments as well.
I just noticed that part of the complaint was a reconstruction of these lot lines based on essentially the wrong plan, historical plan, one that was produced in looks like 1847, and then, or maybe it was the 1895 plan, something along those lines. But the subsequent surveyor kind of clarified, it looks like, so it says that the plan that was at issue is labeled plan number 13, but recorded at plan book 1, page 9, whereas the original surveyor, the complaint is filed against, referenced it as plan book 1, page 13, which isn't the same thing. So we don't know if that's a typo, if it was something that was cited incorrectly in the historical records. It seems like that's the basis for the complaint. And so I have the same questions as Michaeline regarding the depth of research that's involved, but we don't know that that wasn't something that was indexed incorrectly or not. I haven't looked into that. So I think I kind of agree with the two of you that it's not, it's hard to say because I think that there was some potential, for, harm here. So I have mixed feelings about it, I guess. I don't know. What does Shep have to say?
There's absolutely the element of time is brings some of this into question. I think that's a lack of communication that we all see happening when our products get used and we don't know. I guess I have the same concerns. I'm not seeing it any. I don't see it any differently.
I also would like to comment that a lot of our digital products get used as, that signature doesn't always show up with a digital product. And whether or not it was considered preliminary by the surveyor, we're not 100% sure of that, I don't think. But everyone knows that these surveys get used by engineering firms subsequent to our, after our release. So I don't think that the fact that it was a unsigned survey is really relevant in this situation. There could have been a paper survey produced that was signed that we're not privy to.
One of the interesting things in the standards is that, let me see if I can find it. It was just, I was just looking at it, now I've lost it. But the surveyor can, if a plan is submitted, I did just lose it. The plan is submitted without the surveyor's permission. Basically, they have a right to rescind it. Let me see where I can find that. I didn't write it down. It's in the sign and seal section. I'm not going to find it quickly.
Well, while Michaeline's looking, if I might just throw out there that I guess it disturbs me to see the plan without the signature, but if it's getting generated and included and publicized, I feel like our fellow professionals have kind of an obligation to not include things that they are aware to not be complete. And there's I sort of feel like we have a duty to engineering professionals, and they have a duty to us. And if an engineer, used one of my drawings without adequate certification or acknowledgement of having done the work and certified it, I guess I think that's a problem. But that's not a problem that was created by the survey.
I found it. It's actually statute law. It's MRS Title 32, Chapter 141, Section 18226, and it's on page 8 of our packet. And it's 1C. An official of this state or of any city, county, town, or village of the state charged with the enforcement of laws, rules, ordinances, or regulations may not accept or approve any plans, other documents prepared within the meaning and intent of this chapter that are not sealed and signed by a professional land surveyor whose responsible charge they were completed. So that's a lot of this complaint is based on the fact that the municipality accepted something they shouldn't have. And they basically accepted a plan by a surveyor that wasn't signed and sealed by the surveyor.
Which is an issue that we have been seeing come up lately.
Yes.
With hopefully that being addressed, or I think that there's movement to address that with the professional association. So I don't know if that helps, but maybe it will eventually. But we've been seeing that happen more and more, where design professionals are utilizing these plans without the seal of the surveyor.
And it's getting through the municipalities because they do have a stamp, it's an engineer stamp, but there is an oversight that any boundary line decisions require that survey seal, and that's really the bigger part of this problem is that it got all the way through approvals without a surveyor stamp. Why that plan wasn't requested to be stamped, or the correspondence, or what the requirement that was in the licensee's contract, that's missing in this submittal. But I would like to see that, but there clearly is nothing in this correspondence saying that that licensee was bugged to finish the product, or for his understanding, the whole project had just been on hold. And there's just nothing in this documentation to show that anything else different than that was happening, because he was never contacted to complete it. Or so I tend to lean that way, that there's as Shep said, there's a huge disconnect in communication again, which is something we see often. But that seems to be what's up here. But for it to get as far as it did through the municipality and the approval, that should definitely not have happened.
I think this miscommunication is the opposite of what we generally see. The miscommunication we usually see is the surveyor not responding, but in this case, it's the client that didn't communicate.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately that's the telling of the problem that this whole process has now, is that the users of our product don't believe it's necessary to reach back to us for that completion of product, because municipalities in general are taking these electronic files of the documents these other consultants are preparing and using them through the approval process, and forgetting that there's a missing link here that's vital, and it's the surveyor seal. But you're right, but this is something that just continues to go on in a lot of municipalities. So Mike Clean, do you have any thoughts on recommendation as far as this is a troubling situation? It just doesn't seem like there's anything in this complaint that really says that the thing the surveyor did was made an error in the plan and corrected it when he was given notice that it was wrong. But there just doesn't seem to be a lot of bad communication with that licensee based on what was provided us.
I tend to think that most surveyors over our practice make errors periodically. And we could say that he didn't do sufficient research, but the fact that he admitted it and corrected it makes me less willing to make a citation in this case. If he had dug in and refused, as we had in the past case, I'd be a little bit more concerned, but we're not infallible. I don't know how the board feels on that. I can make a citation for the lack of research if you wish.
What exactly what do you mean with citation? Are you talking about a letter?
Part 2, section 4.1 calls for research sufficient of scope and depth to determine the boundaries.
Right.
So, if the board wishes to cite the surveyor for that, it's up to you.
But in terms of the citation itself, are you talking about just an actual citation or a letter of guidance?
A letter of guidance, if you wish, and I'm not particularly even in favor of that in this case.
We don't, I know I'm circling back around to the contract, but do we know if there was a contract that was created?
I didn't make a note about seeing a contract, and as I recall, I didn't go over it again this morning. It was a continuing association with this client.
Yeah, I'd certainly, I'd like to have seen a contract, because that might help us identify what should have been completed. It does show on that survey plan that pins were set, but we really don't even know if that was. I'm just getting at it was other than the signing of the plan really all that remained for the licensee's completion of services, or was this project just put on hold because of the findings of the encroachment, and it stayed idle, but he was unaware that this project was continuing? It just seems like there's just some missing information there that I would like to know, but Shep, anything else? Or?
Oh, I'm just looking at there are 3 requests for action that were made. The first was having the board investigate how many times non-stamped drawings were issued, and whether or not this deceptive practice is considered normal by the individual's standards. I don't think that, I guess that doesn't strike me as it's our function. We can investigate individual instances that are brought to us, but to go out and conduct an ad hoc investigation into every project they've worked on, find out what's ever gone out, I think is well beyond what our responsibility would be. Second was for the board to reach out to the South Portland Planning Board and let them know they did something illegal. And again, I guess I don't really think that's our function. Do we have the, is that our responsibility to police that in that fashion? I guess I don't think that it is, but I'd be interested to hear what everybody else says. And the third request was for us to revoke the license of the individual in question. And I guess I don't think that that's appropriate in this instance.
I agree with those thoughts as well, with those 3 requests for action. I agree that they're outside of the scope of what this board is. Item 2, when I read that, the thought was maybe it's something that, and I don't know if it's in the power of the board or not, but maybe it's time for like the Maine Municipal Association to this had been discussed with MSLS, is to have an awareness that these municipalities that that survey requirement is there for these approval of plans, but I don't even know if that's in our powers, but it's something that is long overdue to let municipalities know that these approvals with just engineering stamps should not be allowed. But I do agree with you that those actions are outside of what we're doing as a board.
I would say the same thing as far as the request for action. Number 1, the first part of that is definitely outside what we would be doing, like investigating a firm for that. But I do think that it's considered normal to release CAD drawings, and whether we have caveats that we send out in the emails that we don't see here, but that sort of practice is definitely normal. And I do not consider it to be deceptive to release CAD files to the design professionals that we work with. And I think as far as the second request for action, I do believe, although I'm not certain, that is possibly being handled through, in some fashion, it's been discussed through the society to try to get the municipalities aware of the fact that, you know, that this statute exists. And as far as the third one, I don't think that this mistake is egregious enough to revoke the license.
So, Michaeline, you don't believe, or was it Jay, you don't believe that a letter of guidance is needed? Maybe a citation letter, or Samantha, do you have any thoughts as far as where we are right now?
Not on the substance of the case necessarily. It's certainly an option for the board to issue a letter of guidance, and a citation is not really a term that falls within the authority of the board. Certainly the board can impose discipline through a consent agreement or at a hearing, but if the board does not feel that there's evidence of potential that rise to that level, it could do either a letter of guidance or just dismiss the case out.
Can I ask a question? I guess what I'm wondering is that it strikes me that they perhaps they're seeking some sort of redress, and would it be more appropriate a civil action than this sort of an enforcement action by our group?
My take on this was that it is going to court, and it's not necessarily just because of the survey, it's because of the engineering firm and what they've done. If you look at the final plans for the subdivision, some of the drainage encroaches on the complainant's property. So this is a bigger issue than what's really before us.
But I think I guess my issue is there was apparently a research mistake that was made when it became apparent the plan, it was fixed. Am I correct with that?
Yes, but it wasn't fixed on the subdivision submission, I think.
But the subdivision submission, we have no way of knowing if they have any control over that at all.
That's right.
I guess when it looks to me, those of us that have never made a mistake in our practice have probably never actually completed a project. I guess I feel like the surveyor appears to have acted in good faith when a mistake was made, brought to their attention. They took responsible action to correct that, and the surveyor has no control over what the engineering firm does or doesn't do with that information once it's corrected. Do we know whether or not the engineering firm was made aware of the mistake?
There's also a case against the engineer at the engineers board. So I think that this has been a long process for the complainant, and the complainant is kind of going everywhere with the complaint. And you know, my feeling for it, the complaint is basically because the municipality signed off on the subdivision without appropriate supervision, or they just should not have signed off on what was presented for various reasons, not just the surveyor.
It seems technically as well that the submission should have, a lot of municipalities will require the perimeter boundary survey of the surveyor signed as part of the submission to show that the boundary lines are being certified to, as well as part of the submission, but that was missed as well. But on the flip side, if the surveyor continued to believe that the process or the whole development was on hold to fix this issue. It just seems, it seems like there was just no correspondence with him, so how would he know? But the submission and the approval should have never happened without that signed plan by the surveyor, but it did. But I don't, based on the lack of correspondence, I think this licensee didn't know it continued down the process, unfortunately. I looked really hard to see if there was something in here saying that we called the surveyor 6 times or none of that correspondence seemed to happen. And his reply of saying he didn't know any of this happened, based on what we received, it does look like he didn't know it was happening.
Yeah, he basically stated he was unaware that the plan was submitted, and he had done the plan in 16, and that was the last contact he had with the engineering firm.
Yeah, my thought initially was through 4 years of this ongoing that he never received a call or correspondence, but there's nothing here saying he did, which all of it seems just, unreal a little bit that no one reached back out to him for 4 years, but that's what he said, and there's nothing here saying that anyone did, so. Does anybody want to make a motion or any thoughts?
So I do quickly want to address the fact that sometimes our plans get used without our permission. In my practice, and this is more for the complainant's benefit, in my practice, I have released signed sealed plans to clients, attended planning board meetings, and then had the client decide to amend the plan, which we went back to the planning board with amended plans. But in the time frame, her real estate agent had utilized the unapproved plan as part of the sales package. So unfortunately that happens, and that I do not accept any liability for that. It was done without my permission entirely. So that sort of thing happens. And the only thing that I see here that may be worth consideration is the research. And I am not sure if that research is due to indexing errors or what the situation is. In the interest of moving this along, I move to dismiss with a letter of guidance, unless you can tell me you prefer not to do that, for letter of guidance, technical standards 2, and subsection 4, 1, public records, and 1 year in the file, and that's it.
Is it worth mentioning that there's no contract that was presented to us as well? Because that is clearly a requirement as well. Because we all modify our contracts a little bit differently in the sense of what's being requested from our clients, and we don't know really what the entire scope was. We make the assumption boundary survey, signed plan, set pins at the corners, but were there any modifications to that agreement? Any of you concerned that we don't have a signed contract as part of this whole complaint?
I am not concerned about that, because I am sure that there were some emails or something that we don't have copies of that would be sufficient to modify that, right?
And I'm okay with it because it wasn't raised in the complaint itself.
Okay, all right. Well, I thought I'd just bring that up as well, but.
I think the other thing I'd mention on that is it's been almost 6 years, and whether any electronic records still exist in the file is a good question. And the complaint committee did not ask specifically for a contract. And perhaps we should have. The letter asks for it, but we did not reiterate that you didn't provide it. And I don't recall if the surveyor addressed that at all.
Has anyone checked statute of limitations for this? It's a small, was it initially discovered 6 years ago?
No, I don't believe so. I think it was discovered by Surveyor 2's survey, which was just a year or two or so ago.
Okay, then my motion stands.
Okay.
Jay, would you state the reference again in your motion, please?
It would have been part 2, section 4.1, research sufficient scope and depth.
Correct.
Okay, do I have a second? Or Shep, were you getting ready to say something?
I just had a quick question. I looked through this and there are a lot of plans. I did not see a subdivision plan as part of this. Did I just miss that?
I think it might have been a condo project.
But these are units that are being offered for sale or lease.
I think so. And I think what I focused on when I looked through the plans was the property of the complainant that still showed part of it being used even after the revised survey as part of the development water.
I guess the only thing that we're seeing a lot of is projects like this when they're multi-unit housing offered for sale or lease, that the way I read the statute is there should be a subdivision plan as part of this. And I understand there's a recent court case that calls some of that interpretation into question, but I just wondered if there had been a plan there that I had just missed.
So I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, Shep.
Okay.
So sorry about that. But I get the gist of what you're saying. I personally have issue with the subdivision situation because of the lack of clarity in subsection 4401. It's actually 4402. And the exceptions to the subdivision statute very, very specifically says under 6, the division of new or existing structures beginning July 1st, 2018, a division of new or existing structure into 3 or more dwelling units, whether the division is accomplished by lease, sale, blah, 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 etc. In a municipality where the project is subject to municipal site plan review is an exception to the subdivision rule. And we can argue about that all day long, and I'm sure the surveyors and the lawyers will be arguing about that all day long. But there was an exception introduced in 2018 that says if these projects of divisions of buildings into dwelling units, whether new or existing, is reviewed under a site review law or site review ordinance, it does not constitute a subdivision. And a lot of surveyors are covering that by labeling it a subdivision regardless and having it some sort of reviewed that way. But it's actually happened several times in municipalities near me where what was previously considered a subdivision for sure is now being reviewed under site reviews, ordinances. It's too ambiguous for us to get into those weeds is what I'm saying, I think.
I'll make a second to Jay's motion.
Okay.
I have to say again how long it wants the letter of guidance to remain in the file.
1 year.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor to dismiss this complaint, Jay Ray,
Yes.
Shep Shepherd,
Yes.
and myself, Jim Netto.
And I abstain.
Okay, the results are 3-0 to dismiss.
Can I just clarify, was that a motion to dismiss outright or to dismiss with a letter of guidance?
My motion was to dismiss with a letter of guidance.
Okay, so was the vote, then I heard of dismiss, but no letter of guidance referenced during the vote though. Can we just clarify that the vote was for a dismissal with a letter of guidance or just an outright dismissal?
No, I believe we, thank you for that correction or that cite, but with the letter of guidance, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next case is